Hello, friends. It's Steph from the StephUp Podcast. I am so excited to share with you that the StephUp Podcast is being featured in Acast and Amazon Music's Indie Podcast Amplifier. It is such an honor to be part of this collection alongside other inspiring Canadian indie creators. You can head over to Amazon Music's podcast page to check it out and support independent voices like mine. Thanks for listening, for learning, and for growing with me. Hello and welcome to the StephUp Podcast. I am your host, Stephanie Ann Webb, and my guest today is author and motivational speaker, Terry Tucker. Terry, thank you for being here on the StephUp Podcast.
Well, Steph, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you again.
Yes, you were in season 2, I believe. 1 or 2, but I think 2. And I probably met you through one of the websites for finding guests, I think. But I'm so grateful that that I did, because it's always a pleasure talking with you. And
Thank you.
I read your first book, Sustainable Excellence. Am I saying this right?
Yes.
Yay! and we talked, and that was such a great book to read. And then you just came out with a new book called 4 Truths and a Lie. And that came out last week.
Right.
Yeah. Which we're going to talk about today. But first, I want to ask you, so you have been through quite a journey. And when you were on my podcast, we talked about your cancer journey, but do you mind sharing a little bit about your cancer journey, and as well as where you are now, like how you're doing now?
Sure. So this goes back to 2012. I was diagnosed with a rare form of melanoma that appeared on the bottom of my foot. And I was told at the time that I would most likely be dead in 2 years. And I thought, well, you've given me a death sentence. How do I try to turn that death sentence into a life sentence? So I went through a 5-year drug therapy to try to keep the cancer at bay while more things became available for melanoma patients. Eventually, I had my foot amputated in 2018, my leg amputated in the middle of the COVID pandemic in 2020. I also found out I had tumors in my lungs at that time. Went on a 4.5-year clinical trial drug that kept my tumor stable. And it was an interesting drug because it did nothing to the cancer, but what it did was unmask the cancer. Cancer secretes a hormone or an enzyme that hides it from your own immune system. This drug unmasked the cancer so that my own immune system could keep it at bay, and it did for 4.5 years until the drug company decided it wasn't profitable enough and pulled it off the market. And then almost immediately, the cancer came back in my stump, and the stump that I have left after my amputation. I had surgery last month to remove that tumor, and I'm going to undergo a new therapy next week where that tumor that was removed was sent to a lab in Pittsburgh. My T cells, which are kind of the big fighter cells in your immune system, billions of those cells were grown. I'm going to go in the hospital for 2 weeks. First 10 days is basically a high dose chemotherapy to kind of reduce your T cell count in your body. Then they will give me my own T cells, and then they will follow that up with what's called IL-2 therapy, which is designed to help the T cells that are already in my body replicate and grow faster. The idea being that those T cells are specifically geared to fight my particular cancer, my DNA type cancer. And the hope is that they go in and wipe out whatever cancer cells are currently in my body. You think about 2012, we have nothing for you, you're going to die. To 13 years later, we have this potentially therapy that could cure you, not just, keep you in remission for a while, but actually cure you. So in 13 years, we've come quite a ways in fighting a disease like melanoma that had nothing to offer you other than surgery 13 years ago.
Yeah. And I remember talking with you just before you were going into the clinical trial.
Mhm.
And in your book you talk about, was it every Monday you had, was it every Monday?
So I would go every 3 weeks,
Oh, every
and it
3 weeks.
would be a week. So I'd go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and I would get the infusion. So I would start on Monday, and that would be blood work, meeting with the doctor, and then the first round of infusion.
Mm, yeah. And that's what's so powerful with hearing your story, hearing you go through this. And, like I'm getting teary eyed hearing about this because when we think about all the stuff of going through something so challenging and what it takes a toll on your physical, your mental, emotional, everything. And you wrote this book, Four Truths and a Lie, and you share your stories. And that's what I really love about how you write. You share the wisdom that you've gained, the wisdom from books, from other people, and you have these experiences that you add in to make it more relatable and add that story to it. And you were writing this and going through all of that, and you wanted to share. And I think that's so powerful, because it's easy to say these things when things are going well for us and everything's perfect. It's like, oh, be grateful. Oh, let's learn resiliency. But it's in those toughest moments, the damn, this is hard. But that's when we grow the most, right? If we're choose to.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, there's a quote from Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain during World War II, who said, "When you're going through hell, keep going." And I love that quote. I think about that a lot. On those days when I just don't feel it. It's like I don't want to do this, and I don't want your audience to think that I'm some kind of Superman. You're looking at me right now. There's no S on my chest. I do not have a cape and fly around with magical powers. I have especially when I was going through the clinical trial. I have those down days. I feel sorry for myself. I cry. I get down, and you get into that sort of woe is me. Look at me. I'm important, and I find a real easy way to get out of that because you're looking internally. It's like look how bad my life is right now. This really hurts. This is really upsetting me. And a real easy way to do that is to go get involved in somebody else's life. Go make a phone call. Go, when I'm sitting in the waiting room waiting to get my therapy, you can always tell the newbies. They've kind of got that, they come in, they sit down, they got that deer in the headlights look. It's their first time there, they're scared to death. And just to kind of roll over in my wheelchair and say, "Hi, I'm Terry. What's your name?" you know
Mm.
and then just to have a little conversation. It's like these are the greatest nurses, the greatest medical assistants. They're going to take care of you. Everything's going to be great. And they just kind of get that feeling. You sort of see the mask come off because somebody's seeing them as another person, not as an infusion patient, not as a cancer patient. It's a human being. It's that connection, that back and forth. And I'll end this with this quick story. There's a psychology professor at the University of Chicago who does this experiment with his students. The idea is you go out and you get on a bus, and in 3 questions, you go deep with somebody. So you get on a bus, sit down next to somebody. "Hey, how you doing?" "I'm fine. How are you?" Question one. And I'm just making this up. Question number two, "What do you do for a living?" "Oh, I'm a doctor." Question number three, "Have you always wanted to be a doctor?" Steph, it doesn't matter what they say. They could say, "No, I grew up on a farm and I wanted to be a veterinarian, but X, Y, and Z happened." Or, "My mother was a doctor, but she died of breast cancer when she was 40, and so I'm honoring her memory by following in her footsteps." Whatever they tell you, they're telling you their why, their purpose, their mission in life. And we don't go deep with people anymore. Social media allows us to stay on the surface. And that for me is really what's important. It's whenever I'm feeling down and depressed, just going out and making a connection, a deep connection with another human being kind of gets me out of that mode.
Yeah, it's so true because I'll have these times where I'm like, oh, I don't want to be around people. And
Right.
um, I'm somebody who likes a lot of quiet and just kind of
Mhm.
peace. But then I can get kind of stuck in there. And that's when I realize when I have conversations with people, especially deep conversations, I come alive. And people want to be heard. They want to be seen. And so that's that connection part. We're so scared of people. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, stranger danger. So I was afraid
Mhm.
of people. But I was given that fear too. But then as an adult, I was like, okay, I'm going to step outside of my comfort zone and talk to people. And I would have people ask me, like, how can you do that? How can you just talk to random people? I'm like, I don't know. Because I want to see them as humans. We're all humans. But when we see each other as in a divisive way, um, as the others or whatever, it's like at the core, we all want to be seen.
Yeah. I mean, we all bleed red. And, and if the COVID pandemic taught us anything, it's how much we need each other. When we were isolated, divorce rates went up, domestic violence rates went up, alcoholism rates went up, drug abuse rates went up. We need each other. We're designed to be social animals. We're not designed to kind of sit in our apartments or our houses and just, but I'm like you. I like peace and quiet as well. But when I go on these podcasts and I get to talk to, hosts like you that ask good questions and stuff like that, I could be feeling terrible. I could, just be coming off therapy or something like that. And that energizes me. It makes me feel better. It gives me purpose in life. And, I don't have all the answers, but I've learned some things, in my 65 years on this planet. So I like to say, hey, I'm offering these. If they work, use them. If they don't, that's fine. Figure out what works for you. But I love, like you, I love those connections with other human beings. It just makes me feel better physically, emotionally, just all over. I feel better for it.
Yeah, we come alive.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And there was something that you said, and you did talk about this in the book, which is very helpful because you had these moments. You said to your wife, like, I just want to die. I just want to go, like, because you're in pain and you're just feeling it. Um, and I think in some aspects, no, I know in some aspects of uh, certain spaces, and it's because people are not comfortable with it, or we just throw words out that we hear. But there's a lot of like, you have to be positive all the time. And yes, positivity is important. Resiliency, like hope, all of that is so needed for us to keep moving forward. But a lot of that also doesn't allow for people to just be. And sometimes, like, you're like, I can't do it. I'm struggling. And you just need that moment, that day, that week, whatever. And when people say you can't, you have to think positively. It's like, okay, there's a nuance to that because you also have to allow, like, you're going through something. And I can't tell you, just think positively, Terry, because you're dealing with something that I'm not. Like, did you get some of that with people when you
Oh,
were struggling?
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm a human being. And I mean, human beings are, we have emotions. And,
Mm.
I love it when people, especially younger people, they think we sort of start at A and then our life just kind of goes like this. It's linear. We go from A, we go to Z, and that's life and everything's great. And I learned this, from playing basketball a long time ago. You start at A and you work really hard and you get better. And then all of a sudden you plateau. And then you work even harder because you want to get better. But you know what? You get worse and you go down. And then you work even harder. And then maybe you plateau again. I mean, so life is not linear. Life is kind of fits and, it's kind of like you end up, if you keep moving, where you need to be, but it's up and down. And there's a Kara Lawson is the women's basketball coach at Duke University, and you can go on YouTube and look at this. She was talking to her team about resiliency, and she says, you guys think that okay, I just got to get through practice and practice, and life will get easier. I just got to pass this test and life will get easier, or whatever adversity you're facing in your life. And her comment is, life never gets easier. You just learn to handle hard better. And I
Oh,
love that. It's like life doesn't get easier. You just grow, you develop, you mature, and you can handle the hard things easier. And how do you do that? By handling hard things. You handle something difficult and you're like, hey, I made it. I made it through that. There's a great book written by Ernest Hemingway called Farewell to Arms, and it's a fiction book, but it's a semi-autobiographical account of his time as an ambulance driver for the Italian army during World War I. And there's a line in that book that I think about a lot. And the line is this: life breaks everyone. And afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. So just like if you were to break your arm and a doctor would set it and put it in a cast, when that bone healed, where that break was, that part of your bone would be stronger than the rest of your bone. That's a metaphor for life. When life beats you to your knees, and it beats all of us to our knees from time to time, if you continue to go forward, and like you say, some days you can't, some days you only take a little baby step, but if you can continue to try to move forward, you will come out the other end of that adversity a much stronger and determined individual.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's like we were taught based on, I guess, I don't know. I thought it came from our parents and grandparents, but that it was just like it is linear. Like you're supposed to do this at this age and do this at the, and it just is like, and then you retire, and then you're supposed to be happy after you retire. Um, but that's what we're given.
Right.
And so then when I wasn't, I have had many different careers. And but I'm also just figuring things out, and I'm like, I'm gonna try this, I'm gonna try that. Cool, didn't like that, okay. And I move on. And I was mad about it for a while because I thought, well, I'm not at that place where I'm supposed to be at this age and this and this and this. But now I'm 45 years old, and now I'm like, oh, all of that was, I was learning something new through it. I met that person that I was supposed to meet, and this, and it, and now I can see how cool it is.
Mhm.
Right? But going through it, I was like, this sucks. I hate this. Why? And I was complaining about it, which made it worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now I'm like, okay. And then it was, I don't know who said it. Probably some wise person, obviously. But they're like, you're going through it regardless. You can either make it worse by being miserable, or you can say, okay, we're going through it regardless. Let's make it something that we can work on. How do we, like, things are a lesson, right? When I get stuff that happens,
Mhm.
and I react, like I'm triggered, but I react and emotionally because it's upsetting. I'm like, oh, okay, this is an opportunity. How can I either learn how to handle this better, or learn what to say, or learn not to say anything, right? So all of these aspects that come up, I used to be very upset like every time something would happen. And now people are like, it's showing you either this is an opportunity to learn, grow, or the shadow part of you needs work, like whatever it is, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's, I don't think anybody suffers in vain. I think whatever adversity you go through in life is supposed to teach you something, or can teach you something, if you let it, if you allow it to teach you something. But I think so many people, and I've done the same thing you have, you get so caught up, you're so mad, you're so upset that you just it's like, hey dummy, you just missed the lesson. And I was like, yeah, I guess I did, kind of thing, and it's like there's a reason, you're going through this. And I always said it, I've done more living in the 13 years I've been dying of cancer than I've done in my entire life. And I had a pretty good life before this. And so, it really is, I've always felt that this cancer journey, that's not true. I haven't always felt, but for quite a while, I've felt that this is something that's bigger than me, that I'm supposed to either set an example. I'm supposed to learn things along the way. I'm supposed to offer things that I've learned to other people, that this is bigger than me. Because I should have been dead so many times along this journey, and I survived. I mean, everybody I started that clinical trial drug that I was telling you about, everybody who I started that trial with is dead. I'm the only person left. And so, you look at that, you're like, okay, first of all, I'm not a lucky guy. You don't take me to Vegas if you're trying to win money. I'm not your lucky, I'm not your lucky charm or anything like that. So it's like, why am I still here? Why all those, I mean, I watched some of their funerals online and stuff like that. It's like, I sat with that person. We talked, we cried together, we did, and now they're gone. And I'm here. Why am I still here? And I think it's because God is using me to show people his love, his mercy, his grace, his peace, his healing. And I'll do that as long as he needs me to, or as long as he wants me to, because that is purposeful for me. That gives me a purpose in life to go through all this ugliness, all this misery, all this pain. I've got a purpose that's bigger than me.
Yeah. And the fact that you get on podcasts, you speak to groups, you're writing books, you're sharing, and it's so wonderful when you say something or somebody reads something you wrote and you're just like, that meant something.
Mhm.
And that's where like sometimes you don't want to say the thing. Sometimes I don't want to put a post up because I'm like, meh. And then somebody will say, that encouraged me. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, that's where you follow the prompts, right? Follow the flow, the spirit. Because you're meant to be there for other people. And so every time you share and write something, you're putting that out into the world, these wonderful, helpful things from what you've learned.
You hope, and that's just it. You put it out there, and if somebody gleans onto it, great. If it passes them by, great as well. And I guess let me tell you this story, and this was in the book. I put this story in the book specifically. So when I started on this infusion drug, there was a young nurse. She was about 25 years old, and she was already a nurse, but learning how to do things on the unit. And about 6 months later, she was taking care of me by herself. And she came in and she said, Terry, I've got a story I want to tell you, but I don't know how to tell it to you. And Steph, I didn't know what do you say to somebody who says that to you? I mean, it's like, oh, I said, well, I hope you decide you want to tell me because I think I would enjoy hearing it. So the next couple hours, she's in and out doing her thing, and then finally comes in, sits down. She said, all right, here's the story. She said, when I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. I had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I talked to my family. I was going to quit nursing. I was going to go to work for Amazon. And she said, then I met you. And she said, I see how I had a very bad reaction to my medication. I shook very violently, threw up and all this stuff. She said, but you keep coming back every day. You never miss. You always come back. And she said, and then when I was caring for you, I went back in the chart and I read everything you'd been through, the drug therapies, the amputations and things like that. And she said, and when I finished reading your story, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that just the way I was living my life, just the way I was showing up every day, had such a benefit or such a positive impact on that young woman. So, anybody who's listening to us right now, if you think your life doesn't matter, if you think your story isn't important, I can promise you're wrong. It is important. There's somebody out there, somebody you may know, somebody you may have no idea that's sort of watching you from afar and trying to figure out how the way you're handling your adversity, that they can implement that in their life. So they would give almost everything they have just to walk 5 minutes in your shoes. So don't ever think that your story, what you're going through, doesn't matter. I promise you it does to somebody else.
Yeah. And, you know, um, uh, sometimes, and you do talk about this, but what we believe about ourselves, not sometimes, most of the time, like all the time, basically, impacts what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so there were times, I don't know if you ever dealt with, like, I think you did a little bit, worthlessness. Did you ever feel like you were worthless?
Not worthless, but kind of like, what's the point?
Okay.
It's like, I always felt that, being again, having faith and being that I was created by God, I don't think I'm worthless, but you kind of get to the point where you start, yeah, you talk to yourself, but you also talk to God. It's like, really?
Yeah.
Again? What's the point? I mean, what's going on here? You kind of have those, middle of the night moments with your savior, and you're like, what? What do you want? What are you trying to do here? Can I get a break here? 13 years, like, well, you were in remission. I've never been in remission. remission. I've always been in treatment in 13 years, whether it was, having an amputation and learn how to walk again, whatever it was. I've never had, well, these 5 years, I was in good shape. I've never been in good shape for 13 years. And it's like, come on, give me a break here. Don't I deserve, but that's the kind of the question, the why me? What, why me? Why did you give this to me? And people have asked, you've asked that question, right? Steph, I don't mean to sound, like I'm something bigger than I am. I never asked that question because it was always like, why not me? What makes me any more special that I shouldn't get cancer than my neighbor or, somebody that I worked with or somebody at church or the gym or anything like that? Why not me? Why shouldn't I be somebody who got this? And the funny thing is, I guess it's not funny, but it's interesting. I've had all 88 genes that doctors either know of or suspect cause every form of cancer that we know of in the world tested. And I have absolutely no mutations in any of my genes that would predispose me to any form of cancer. And yet I got this incredibly rare form of melanoma.
Wow. Yeah. It's
Why did I
fascinating
get
that you've never asked why me. I've asked that many times, but like you're saying, we're no better than somebody else who might get this like something else, right? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, very interesting. Um, well, I actually don't know if I remember what I was going to say about feeling worthless.
Don't get like me, please. I do that all the time.
No, I do. That's why I thought I had ADHD. I don't, but I thought I did because like, but my brain can go all these different places. Oh, yeah, feeling like, keeping yourself small. I did that a lot. Like I grew up just feeling worthless all the time, and like I kept myself small because I believe the stories that people were putting upon me, like squashing you down, and then you keep squashed because you're like, oh, they're putting me in a box, and now I'm like, no, you don't get to keep me in a box. But I would be, especially as I started becoming more just saying things like putting on my podcast, I was terrified and all these different things. It's like, oh no, I can't say, well, that's stupid. I would get ideas. I would, that's stupid. That's stupid. No, don't say that. And it's like, then I heard somebody, and it was actually in 2020. And it was a man from the John Maxwell team, Paul Martinelli. And he said, all these ideas that we get, all these things creatively come from above. So he goes, don't squash it. Like maybe not all of them are meant to be the thing that, we get all sorts of, I get ideas all the time. And I'm like, oh, cool. And then it goes away. But it's at least if it continuously comes up, he goes, don't squash that. And that was the first time I was like 40 years old. I've been squashing all of these things, thinking it was stupid because I thought it came from me. It was, oh, that's stupid, right? So, anyways, all that to say is when we share and we don't know the impact that could make on somebody else who's going through something similar or the exact same thing or whatever. And I've seen people post and share things. I'm like, I needed that. I needed that today. Thank you for sharing and not keeping it within, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've been a guest, fortunately, luckily, on probably 750 podcasts. Now,
Wow.
there have been podcasts that I've been on where the host should not have had a podcast. He or she was terrible. They didn't put in the work. They didn't put in the grind. But I've always felt this way. I've never been on a podcast that I shouldn't have been on. That there was a reason I was on that podcast because somebody who more than likely I will never meet, I will never have a connection with, needed to hear something we discussed, some part of that conversation that either you said or I said or what we were both taking away from a particular event. So I've always kind of felt guided, like, yeah, you should be on that podcast, and then no, you should be on that one, and things like that. So yeah, again, it comes back to, I mean, we're all interconnected. We all do better together. So you may see something and I may see something, and you may take X away from it and I may take Y away from it, but we're seeing the same thing. So why can't we, hey, Steph, what'd you learn from that? Oh, I learned this. Oh, you know what? I never thought about it that way. Terry, what'd you learn? I learned this. Oh, I never thought about it that way. So it's that constant give and take. It's like, well, because you don't think like me, you're bad. No, I just saw that we saw the same thing. It's kind of like when I was in law enforcement, somebody would describe a suspect to a crime. And there'd be four people, and one person would say, he had a green T-shirt on and blue jeans, and another person would say he had a black T-shirt on, and khakis. And it's like, wait a minute, you all looked at the same thing, but you saw something different. And through neuroscience, and I think I put this in the book, they're starting to understand that our brains are predictive organs. It predicts what it thinks you want to see, and then that's what it gives you. So we're all looking at the same suspect, but we're all seeing different things because our brains are predicting what we want to see and giving that to us.
And understanding that, because I used to watch, like, I like watching lawyer shows, crime
Yeah,
shows, all that stuff. And I'd be like, they have an eyewitness, so they have 5 eyewitnesses. And before I understood more, I was like, I don't get it. How can they all say different things?
right.
But I also grew up very black and white. It's like,
Yeah,
that person's lying or that person's telling the truth. And now it's like, no, also, like, yeah, our brains are, or you might be getting mixed up with somebody else, or our memory is not as,
right,
like, who knows? And especially if you're going through a traumatic event, your
right.
memory is not going to be perfectly clear. Um, and so all of those different things add aspects to, and that's why law and justice and all that is not so clear cut.
No. And that's why you need more than an eyewitness. I think most lawyers, most prosecutors would say, I'm not going to trial with just an eyewitness account. I've got to have some kind of physical evidence or something that links that person. Oh, that person saw them and, their fingerprints were on, the $100 bill that they stole, or whatever it ends up being. There's got to be sort of the totality of the circumstances. It can't just be one thing. Even if it is, oh, I'm 100% sure that I saw that, person and this is what they were wearing. Yeah, you're right. And that's, one of the things we're taught in the academy is how your body reacts to a critical incident, how your hearing goes away, how you get tunnel vision, how your fine motor skills are terrible. That's why we practice drawing from our holster thousands of times, because then it becomes just muscle memory and you're not having to rely on, oh, I've got to unsnap here and unsnap here, pull the gun back, pull it out. Now, no, it's just boom, it's out because that's muscle memory. So yeah, you're right. In a critical incident, your blood pressure goes up, all the things. I mean, I'm probably better at it because I've lived through it and I've been trained through it than John Q. Citizen on the street who has never been through a critical incident and sees something, sees a shooting or something like that. So you can train yourself, but how many of us are going to go train ourselves, to that thing that's going to happen maybe once or never in our entire lives? And it's like, I'm going to spend all this time training myself. I'm like, yeah, it's really, I don't think it's time well spent. Go train yourself on something else.
Yep. So, in the book, you talk about, so 4 truths and a lie. And the lie is that, oh, wait, can I say it?
Sure.
It's in the introductions.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's that our value and worth is determined by material things we possess or our influence over others. And so that is so prevalent in the world today. And, man, so this will make sense, I promise. I grew up, I was always chubby. And so in my mid 20s, I did this cleanse and I lost a lot of weight. But then I was able to go shopping for clothes for the first time. It was fun.
Mhm.
But that was the start of a shopping addiction
Mhm.
because I went and I could try on clothes, which is so fun. But then I was like, I need to have the brand names.
Mhm.
And then after that, I moved to Toronto and there was all these big stores. And I was like, because I was putting, and people said, even if you lose weight, if you don't really love yourself, it's not going to really matter. Because I used to say, as long as I lose weight, I'll be wonderful and perfect. Everything will be perfect. No, because I was still not loving myself. I was still very much um going like not in a good place emotionally,
Mm,
mentally. So, so all of that became identity. I had to have the brand name this and this and this. And that I lived that life for so long, I got into debt because I was shopping with all the things and which I really couldn't afford. I just put on credit. Um, and then I couldn't go out without having perfect makeup, without which I never was never really good at anyway, so it wasn't perfect. But just I had to look a certain way. And now I don't really bother with makeup anymore. I mean, just because I don't find it fun. But and I'm like, okay, cool. I don't need that stuff. And it's fascinating how freeing that is. When I thought I had to look perfect and do all that. And so that is such a lie. And we see this and the shows, they've got and the influencers, they're like, oh, we got these filters that people put on and they put on like they're renting this mansion or this private jet. So people think, so we're putting on this show. And it's like we get so caught up in that. We see that and people are buying into this lie.
yeah.
And yeah, it was really important that like obviously it's really important that you share that, but like I guess I'm just trying to ask. I don't know what I'm trying to ask. I just wanted to share that because it's a very important thing to share. Did you have any thoughts on that before I ask my next question?
Sure. So
Sorry,
I got
I'm
thoughts on
kind of like,
everything.
what?
So, before I had my amputation, before I ended up in a wheelchair, I was 6'8" tall, 230 pounds. When I walked into a room, everybody stopped and looked. I mean, it was just, you got used to that. Now I'm in a wheelchair and I don't have a left leg. And so when I wheel into a room, everybody looks too, but they look for different reasons. And, some people would say, oh, the heck with them if they're uncomfortable. I've always taken it upon myself to try to, sort of cut through the clutter and make a joke, or something like that. Like, yeah, I used to be up here. Now I'm down here. I'm looking at everybody's butts. So, I mean, just something to break the ice a little bit for people that, oh gee, who is this guy? Why does he not have a leg and stuff, or how'd you lose your leg? Oh, it was a freak frisbee golf accident or something. I'll make up some goofy story and stuff like that. So yes, we're sort of sold this book of lies. And there's a great fable. I don't think this story ever actually happened, but it's a great story. Most people know about Alexander the Great, and I put this story in the book as well. Alexander the Great, probably the greatest conqueror of all times, probably also the greatest mass murderer, probably eclipsed Hitler many times over, conquered the entire world. And there's a story that as he's dying, he calls his counselors around him and he says, look, I want you to carry out my final three wishes. My first wish is I only want my doctors to carry my coffin to the grave. My second wish is I want the road to the cemetery paved with gold and silver and precious stones. And my third wish is I want my hands hanging outside my coffin. One of his counselors steps forward and says, excuse me, you're Alexander the Great. You're the most powerful man in the world. You could have anything you want. Why these three wishes? He said, well, number one, I want my doctors to carry my coffin to the grave because I want people to understand that no doctor cures anything. They just help the body to cure itself. So people need to be cognizant of how they treat themselves. Do they eat right? Do they exercise? Do they meditate? Do they do the things we know that make us healthy? He said, secondly, I want the road to the cemetery paved with gold, silver, and precious stones because I spent my entire life conquering, gaining power, money, and influence, and yet none of that is coming with me beyond the grave. And then finally, with my hands hanging outside my coffin, I want people to understand that I came into this world empty handed and I leave it pretty much the same way. And I love that story because it really kind of, that's what the lie is all about. it's not what you accumulate. It's the lives that you touch along the way of your life. Because like I said, you could be Elon Musk, billions and billions and billions of dollars. John D. Rockefeller, probably the richest man ever in the history of the world, had what would be equivalent today about $400 billion back in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
Really?
And yeah, and I mean, the guy took none of it with him. He's buried in the ground right next to, his son. And so it's like, okay, none of that stuff matters. So why not give those connections, those relationships? And I'll end with this story. Steph, you and I we probably know these people that feel that they're born empty, and that when they get out of school and get into life, whatever that looks like for them, that then their job is to fill up their empty self. I got to make the most money, drive the nicest car, live in the nicest house, have all the latest gadgets and gizmos. And what I've learned is we're not born empty. We're born full with whatever we need to be successful already inside us. We just need to find it, pull it out, and use it for our benefit. So our job in life should not be to fill ourselves up. Our job or purpose in life should be to empty ourselves out with our unique gifts and talents, certainly for the betterment of ourselves, but also for the betterment of our families, our friends, and our communities.
And I like to watch near-death experiences, and people talk about like that question is how did you love? And when I see certain things and I'm like, oh, we have to be like how I was raised, right? It's like we have to be against this and this and this. And it's all in the base of what they think. And I'm like, but it's so full of hate and being against. And that's where as a kid I knew I used to ask, can't we just love people? Because kids know, and then you're given all this extra stuff, and you're like, yeah, I have to be against so and so. Like the Hatfields and McCoys, they just knew that they had to be against their neighbor and hate them. But generations go by and they didn't know like what exactly happened, right? And anyway, so for me, learning more about love, coming back to that, and empathy, which you talk about in your book, which is so important. Um, yeah, when you pass over, you're like, how much did you love? And
There's a I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
that's
interrupt you.
okay. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you talk about near-death experience. Have you ever read the book Imagine Heaven?
Was it made into a movie?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Then no.
So it's a book about people who have near-death experiences, and I took a lot of. It was actually recommended to me. One of my nurses recommended, who'd been a hospice nurse, and she said, "You got to read this book." And we had great conversations about it. And it's about people who have near-death experiences. And one of the big things I took away from it is this: no matter who the person saw during that near-death experience, whether it was an angel or Jesus or a friend, a relative, father, mother, whoever it was, almost everybody got asked the same question. And that question was kind of like what you just said: how do you treat my people? Not, did you cheat on your spouse? Not did you steal from your company? Not did you honor your father and mother? But how did you care for each other? How did you love each other? And I thought, that's interesting. We got all these commands. So I'm not telling you to break the commandments. Absolutely do the commandments. But what I am saying is how did we treat each other? If that's what people who are dying and seeing somebody on the other side are being asked, maybe we need to pay more attention. It's just like Jesus in the Bible. What's the greatest commandment? Love your God, with all your heart, your mind, your soul. And the second is just like it: love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
That's it. That's, like you said, that's the most important thing. That's what Jesus Christ told us to do. I think maybe we got to pay attention to that.
I always get teary-eyed, so don't mind me.
No, that's okay.
This is part of being an HSP. Um, but yeah, that's so I think you did mention that book in your book.
I think
I
I
remember
did. Yeah.
seeing
It,
that.
it was was that book, and there's also a book called Being Mortal. It's written by a doctor, and it talks about how, we're so afraid to die in society, especially Western society, that we will do everything. We will have a surgery that basically splits us from our Adam's apple down to our pubic bone, lays us open, all these tubes in us. Oh, and maybe there's a 1% chance that it'll help you or cure you, or you won't die. And it's like there's a point in time when you have to say, we've done all we can. I mean, we can do more. I mean, there's always more you can do, but is the benefit of what we're going to do going to outweigh the misery that you're going to go through, that your family's going to go through? It's okay to die, and we're all going to do it. We all get it once, and it's funny, when I had my leg amputated and found out these tumors in my lungs, I went with my wife to the mortuary, to the cemetery, and to the church, and I planned my funeral. And because I go on podcasts like yours, and I speak to groups in person, I actually got some pushback from people who commented that, well, planning your funeral, that's kind of defeatist, isn't it? And I was like, well, the last time I checked, we're all going to die. I don't think anybody's working on a cure for life right now. Every one of us is going to die, but not every one of us is going to truly live. And I heard a Native American Blackfoot proverb years ago that I absolutely love. And it goes like this: when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for.
Are you looking for a fun and meaningful gift for the little ones this Christmas? My children's books, What Should Dragon Do? And Fairy Garden Adventures, Zara's Treasure Troubles, are full of imagination, heart, and gentle lessons about kindness, courage, and learning from our mistakes. They're perfect for bedtime stories, stocking stuffers, or cozy holiday reading by the tree. You can find the link here in the show notes, or just search on Amazon under Stephanie Ann Webb, and bring a little extra magic and meaning to your child's Christmas this year. Yeah. Oh, there's so much in there, and I think I was going to say something. Anyways, things leave my brain, and that's okay. Oh,
We'll come back.
Yeah, exactly. Acceptance. That was one of the things that I've been very blessed to know many amazing people, and in the podcasting spaces, coach spaces, entrepreneurial, but just like spiritual, personal growth. I mean, there's all sorts of different people all over, but I've been able to meet amazing people like yourself. And I've learned so much, and people were sharing with me about acceptance, because I didn't want to accept anything. It was like, nope, resistance. But it's like, until you accept it, it just frees you from that. And actually, it was maybe a few years before Betty White passed. I think I read this. And she said, my mother told me, never fear death. It's just a part of life. And I always feared death, even when I was sure exactly what I knew I believed. I was so scared of it, because it was kind of this thing where, like, oh, you have to do it right before you die. And I was like, oh my goodness, we're just here to learn, aren't we? And so that was very helpful for me. I just felt kind of more at peace. And accepting it, I'm like, I'm okay. If I was a few months ago, I was on the highway, and the truck right in front of me, two of the tires blew. And I was like, and right before, like, I was like, oh my goodness. Because you're thinking, what if we slam in? What if something happens? It was fine. Obviously, I'm here. But I was actually thinking, like, all of that kind of came before me. And I was thinking, it's okay. It's okay if I get in an accident and die right now. And I never would have thought that before. So just having that accepting, I mean, doesn't mean I want to pass away right now. I'm like, nah, I want to stay here. Thank you. But I'm also okay with things that happen. And it helps you to live more accepting. What do you think?
Yeah, it helps you to live more intentionally. Yeah, I mean, to know that we're going to die. And that's just it. We're afraid of what we don't know. And none of us know death. None of us understand death. Even when we have people who experience death and then can come back and tell us about it, we're still afraid of it. And I'll be honest with you, there are times I'm afraid of it, but on the other hand, it's like, boy, wouldn't it be great to stand in front of the creator of the entire universe and have him or her or it or whatever you want to, say about it, say, well done, good and faithful servant. We have a purpose. We're not here randomly. We just don't show up and then do our thing and then leave. There's a reason. There's a purpose. Even Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, was a Holocaust survivor during World War II. In that book, he talks about we shouldn't live our life in the abstract, that every one of us has a reason, a purpose, a mission that we were put on the face of this earth to do. We almost have a moral responsibility to find that purpose in life and live it. But so many people don't. There's a entrepreneur by the name of Ed Mylett, and Mylett was USA Today's entrepreneur of the year. It's easy for me to say in 2023. And he talks about the four types of people in the world. And he said the first group are the unmotivated. And he said that's the vast majority of people that you will encounter in your life. He said the second group are the motivated. He said they live their life kind of at a carrot and stick approach to life. If I do this, I will get that. It's sort of low level, but it works for a lot of people to have a very happy and successful life. The third group he talks about are the inspirational people. The word inspiration coming from two words, in spirit. So if you're an inspirational person, you move people with your energy. And then the last group he talks about are the aspirational people, where people aspire to be like you. And sometimes, depending on the group I'm talking to, I might tell that story and they're like, all right, show of hands, how many people are unmotivated? Nobody raises their hand. Nobody ever says, I'm that guy who's just walking around doing nothing with his life, and stuff like that. But if you believe Mylett, that's the vast majority of people you will encounter in your life. And I always encourage people, you want to be aspirational, but I mean, so few people ever get to that point in their life. But can you be inspirational? Can you move people with your energy based on how you live your life? I think we can all do that. It's a matter of whether we want to or not.
Yeah. And not even it doesn't have to be in a big way. Because sometimes we see entrepreneurs and they're like, we think they're talking about, well, you're not making millions of dollars like me or whatever. But it's in how even just the people in our lives or in our social media, whatever, right? It's in that. And one of the things I do find in the motivational spaces, because this was me, I would see these people, like a lot of type A personalities, and they're like, they're doing all these things. And somebody like me, who was just struggling, I was just surviving. I'd be like, I want to be like that, but I can't do 100 things in a day like they do. And now I know we all, first of all, I'm built differently. I'm not that person who's like, I like to rest a lot in between things, and because that's what I need for myself. But also, as long as you're taking those small steps forward. And so I do think also, and you mentioned this in your book, because you talk about empathy and understanding if people's basic needs are not met. Like, that's so important for our needs to be met, because we do better, right, when we're supported in all these things. But for people who are struggling, and I think that also might tie into the unmotivated, possibly. Like, we don't know what's really going on. People will say, you're lazy, you're procrastinating, but there's like a deeper level of, I don't know my purpose yet, or I don't know what I'm good at, or I think I'm worthless, or whatever, right? And so, yeah, I know, like, there's so many different conversations to that.
Let me throw this out to you.
Okay.
And I wish I would have learned this when I was younger.
Yeah.
There's a guy by the name of Jeff Wetzler. I think I talk about this in the book as well. I kind of gauged my life by putting up these arbitrary mileposts. Okay, by the time I'm 29, I want to be making $100,000 a year. By the time I'm 34, I want to be married and I want to have 2 kids. And so we put up these arbitrary mileposts with these arbitrary dates on them. And then what happens when we don't meet them, when I'm not making $100,000 a year when I'm 28 years old? Oh, I must be a failure. Oh, I'm not any good. Oh, there's a problem with me and stuff like that. And Wetzler talks about looking at our lives in terms of decades. He said, forget the arbitrary milepost. He said, in your 20s, do everything. Do anything that interests you at all. If you think it might be cool, do it. He said, and make a ton of mistakes along the way. Not for the sake of making errors, but for the sake of what you learn when you make those mistakes. And then he said, in your 30s, find those two or three things that just, man, this is it. These, all those things I did in my 20s, these are the two or three things that I just absolutely love. Can't wait to get up in the morning and do them, and do those things. And then he says in your 40s, he said, when you're more established in life, you understand how life works, you understand how politics are played, you're financially better off. He said, find that one thing and dig into it. And he said, then in your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, and beyond, you will reap the benefits, you will reap the rewards of living your life in decades as opposed to living your life by those individual mileposts.
Mm, yeah. I remember reading that in your book, and that was very interesting. And it's also it's helpful too, because if we're going along, and I see this in the young people. My niece is 18, turning into 19 soon, and second year university. And we're like, why don't you take a year off? No, I can't be behind. This is such a fear. And it's a fear because of what we see on the news. We see, the world is kind of going through this, like, what's happening phase where people are losing their jobs. Uh, we don't know what's going on. And that's how life works at times, where, I find it funny during COVID, people were like, we're in unprecedented times. I'm like, well, we're always kind of, we just get used to it for a while until things shift, and then you're shocked, but that's how life is. But anyways, I feel for the young generation, they're given such fear. And it's like, you can't, you have to, you can't get behind. And I was like, dude, you're 18, it's okay. Look at me. I've had how many different careers? And I'm like, but it's just been this thing where I'm like, okay, let's try this now. uh, and I'm grateful for it, because then I learned what I did not like, which I did not know at 15, 16, 18, anything, what I wanted to do, and they expect you to know. Like, I don't know. I would not have known, because I wasn't ready for it. What I want to do now. I mean, I sort of did, but I didn't. Anyways, it's a process. So that's so helpful, especially for people who are given this whole thing. Like, you have to have it figured out by this age, and do this at this time. And they're so scared.
They are. But then you're right. I mean, I went to college. My brother and I were talking about this. We both got basketball scholarships to play in college. And I hate admitting this, but I'm going to admit it anyway. I went to college to play basketball. Getting a degree, getting an education was secondary. And my brother said the same thing. I mean, I went to college to play basketball. And, you kind of look at that and you're like, I mean, I went to college and my dad was like, major in business. Oh, okay. I'll major in business. Because I had no idea what I wanted to major in college. Would I do it again? Probably not. I'd probably major maybe in political science or something like that. I really enjoy the law and things like that. But that's growing and becoming more mature and things like that. So yeah, I mean, what 17, 18-year-old kid knows what they want to do with their life? And yet we're like, you got to figure this out now, and this is what your major's got to be, and you got to do this. And that's fine. I mean, it's interesting. Our daughter went to the United States Air Force Academy, and she said, you know what? I'm going to do the tough things now when I'm young so that it sets me up for success when I'm older. And I'm like, wow, I would have never come to that realization when I was her age. I was like, I don't know whose daughter you are, but you know what? Thank you. You must take after your mom. So, it was like, I would have never come up with that. It would have been, sure, somebody would have told me what to do. I would have done it. I mean, I was a total jock. I was totally into playing sports. And like I said, the byproduct was I got a degree along the way. And I'm glad I did. It taught me some things. I've got some great relationships from that, but I didn't go to college to get a degree. I went to college to play basketball. So, I can't believe I just admitted that on a podcast. So
Oh, but that's a lot of people. I
yeah,
watch the sports movies. I don't get football, but I love the football movies for some reason.
yeah,
Well, because they're inspirational.
sure.
um, but a lot of times it's, yeah, I gotta go because football scholarship or whatever, right? Or sports scholarship. And also some of the people who learn when they have an injury, and you learned this, because you had an injury when you were playing basketball, like a huge
Mhm.
one. And so when we're attaching ourselves to the need for that, and then something comes around and we feel like life might be devastating, but it's actually leading us towards something else.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's a tough lesson to learn,
Especially when you're young.
especially when you're young, but also so good when you're young than when you're living that. And then for years, you get the thing that you want, and then something is like takes you off of it. And you're like, what do I do now? Um,
Yeah,
that's not
yeah.
easy.
Well, there's an old Stoic philosopher or Stoic philosophy that goes, no man steps into a river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man. And I like that because it's right. You're constantly growing, you're constantly developing. You go to college, you're a different person when you come out of college than when you went into college. You majored in something. Again, I majored in business. Never really enjoyed business, but it certainly helped me when I started my businesses and things like that. So, there's always a silver lining. There's always something you can learn. And that's what life should be about. One of the things I was taught when I was a hostage negotiator, always be curious. I want to die learning. I want to die understanding. And that's what I find interesting. That's why I talk to people. What do you do? Why do you do what you do? How'd you get to this point? Just things like that. Tell you kind of a funny story. My wife is in the financial services industry, and we used to go to the obligatory holiday parties. And I used to tell her, I said, all right, I'm going to go in here. I'm going to find 5 of your colleagues, and at the end of the night, I'm going to come out and I'm going to tell you, like where they grew up, how many siblings they have, how they met their spouse, how many kids they have, where they went to college, everything. I said, and then Monday morning when you go to work, they're going to individually come to you and tell you what a great guy I am. And the interesting thing, Steph, was that they never asked those reciprocal questions. Well, Terry, where did you go to college? Or where did you grow up? Or how many kids do you have? They would never ask that. So it would always be me asking the questions. And we are narcissistic. We love talking about ourselves. So by doing that, I was feeding their ego. And they thought I was the greatest guy in the world. When our daughter was young, I used to tell her, you want to be a great conversationalist? Go to a party and ask people questions about themselves and then shut up. Don't say a word. I said, they'll
unless you
think you're the
get that
greatest person in the world.
unless you get that one person who's like, yes, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Which
like, I
are
don't know what to
always
do
good
with these
people on a
people.
podcast, right? Well, what do you think about this? Yes. Really? That's all you got for me?
Oh, so funny. Well, did you ever watch Ted Lasso?
I've seen clips. I've never seen an entire episode, but yes,
So good. You would like it, I
okay.
think.
Okay.
um, there was also, I wanted to mention a story in your book where you went into one of the regular doctor appointments, and the woman at the front desk asked you, or she goes, "You're always so nice and friendly, um, and everyone else is really grumpy and And as somebody who worked on the phones and in retail, I also had the same, like, because I was fearful of people. I didn't know what to do when they were like upset.
Hmm.
But you then shared, can you share the story of that? Because you obviously speak it better than I would.
Sure. So when I would start my clinical trial drug therapy week, well, the first thing I had to do was go to the lab and get my blood work done. And I was always there at like 6 a.m. before the place even opened. And the receptionist would be there, and she'd open the doors. And, I'd ask her, because I always started on Monday, how was your weekend? And she kind of had a side hustle business. How's your business? How's your family? And that kind of stuff. And one day she says to me, she said, you're always so kind to me. You always ask me about, myself, my weekend, my family, and things like that. And I sort of got the sense that there was something behind that. And I said, well, aren't the people and she was the receptionist, so she's checking everybody in for the entire day. I said, well, doesn't everybody treat you kindly and that's, it was kind of like I opened the door and she was like, no, people are mean, they're gruff, they yell at me, they, ignore me, they treat me bad. I said, oh, I got it. But again, this is a place where people are having blood work that may mean they've got to have chemo or surgery, or God forbid, sorry, there's nothing more we can do for you. You got to go into hospital. I said, these are life and death situations that people are dealing with. And you have a tremendous opportunity based on you being the first point of contact with those people to just, I mean, and I did this as a hostage negotiator, hey, you look like you're having a tough day today. Again, kind of what I talked about of wheeling up to somebody, in the waiting room of the infusion center. Oh my gosh, somebody sees me as a human being, not just as a cancer patient or somebody's going to, a lab number or something like that. So I talked to her about the difference between perception and perspective. And perception is how you see the world. The problem with it is it's based entirely on everything that you've experienced in your life. The kind of parents you had, the household you grew up in, your education, your faith base, the friends you had, where you went to school. All that is your perception of the world. It's great, but it's germane only to one person, and that is you. That's how you see the world. Nobody else sees the world exactly the way you do because nobody else has lived the same life that you've lived. And we talked about then perspective. And perspective is being able to put yourself in another person's shoes, to be able to say, man, look, you're having a tough day today. Wow. Not, hey, how you doing? But you look like you're having a tough day. You don't have, it's not one size fits all as a receptionist. You don't always have to be happy, especially in that role when you're dealing with people that are dealing with life and death issues. So we talked about you have a tremendous opportunity to let people feel that they're being seen because you're the first point of contact, and also to make their day better. No matter how gruff they treat you, no matter how rude they treat you, that you can smile at them. You can say, hey, I'll have good thoughts for you, or I'll pray for you, or whatever it ends up being, just to let them know, don't take this personally. It's not you. They don't, you're just a faceless person that's, they see you as a faceless person who's just checking them in. You have an opportunity now to be able to have them seen as a human being instead of that faceless person.
Yeah. And that takes understanding because
Yes.
oh man, I used to take everything personally. I'm like, that person yelled at me,
Yeah.
that person, and I was like, but I come from a big shame based background. And so I took everything personally. And then people would say, stuff, don't take it personally. But understanding that, right?
Mhm.
It's not about me and their, and I worked at a bank. So I used to be like, oh, why does everyone hate me? Oh, dude. First of all, when you're dealing with people's money,
Yep.
well, they're stressed. And food. I worked at a restaurant too, and people were mad. So I'm like, okay, food and money. Don't
Mhm.
get people when they're hangry and like struggling with food, with money. Um, and it was like, if I had known this when I worked there, I think I would have had a much better time. But yeah, right. Um, it's fascinating, but that's why human behavior is fascinating. I love learning about this stuff because when I did, it was like it opened up so much more to me. Oh, okay. First of all, it's not about me.
Mhm.
Great. Right? And second, you want to be heard, you want to be seen. And a lot of times, uh, and this is what like we talk about holding space for people. Um, for a lot of us, like you were saying, with we want to talk about ourselves, and many times we'll share something, and then you've got that person who's like, "Well, you think that's bad? Guess what happened to me?" And then you're like, "Okay, I can't share because and." And it's fascinating observing. I have friends who also remind me like just observe.
Yeah.
Observe people's behavior. You don't have to like react, get mad, see it as good or bad. You can just be like observing and then choose how you're going to respond. And like this is a very fascinating thing. I'm so grateful to be learning this.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's things that I learned, especially being in law enforcement, being on the SWAT team as a hostage negotiator and things like that. I mean, I remember when my first negotiation, I was a block away from the person. I was talking to him on the phone, and they're like, okay, when you start this, smile. I'm like, what? Smile. I'm like, smile? The guy's a block away. The guy can't see me. What do you mean, smile? It's like, no. If you smile, and you know this, I mean, if from being a teller, if
On
you
the phone.
smile, it comes across on the phone. And the other thing is, if you're with another human being and you smile, you there are mirror neurons in your brain. So there's a good chance that if you smile at somebody, unconsciously they will smile back at you because those mirror neurons will react and they'll smile back at you. And we all know, you put a smile on your face, you have a happy day. And I mean, it's not that Pollyannish, but it in a lot of ways it is. We can make ourselves feel better pretty easily. We just choose to, I'm going to be in the funk today and I don't, things are terrible. And it's like, yeah, you can live that way. Or you can say, yeah, this is bad, but what can I learn from it? What can I get out of this? How can I make myself feel better? It's just, it's do I have to or do I get to? Do I have to get up this morning or do I get to get up this morning? Do I have to take my kids to school or do I to take my kids to school? It's all which cup do you want, which handle do you want to grab? I I don't always do the, I get to, but I try to do the I get to more than I do the I have to.
Yeah, like we're not perfect.
Right.
I sometimes I'm like, oh, I say this, and then oh, I just did that, blah. But then I'm
Yeah.
like, well, it's fine. I'm aware of it. I'm learning, and we're human.
Right.
We're going along as we go.
Yeah.
Well, Terry, this is so much fun talking with you. If anyone wants to reach out to you, where's the best place to find you?
My website, motivationalcheck.com. You can leave me a message there. So that would be the easiest way.
Awesome. And do you have any words any words of wisdom you'd like to leave the listeners and watchers with?
I guess let me tell you one more story. I had one of my all I got is like sports and nurse stories, so this is gonna be another nurse story. So I had a nurse ask me one time, what was it like to have your foot amputated and then have your leg amputated? And I said it hasn't been easy. I haven't learned how to walk again. Both times. With a artificial leg and with orthotics in my shoes and things like that. It was hard. But I said the interesting thing about it is that was the physical side of my life, and we work incredibly hard on this body, this physical body that we have. And what we don't work on is who we really are, our hearts, our minds, and our souls. We all know that one day this body's going to die, it's going to decay, it's going to turn to dust and be gone. But our heart, our mind, and our soul, those things live on. Those things are those intangibles that we go to the gym all the time, we eat right, we get enough rest, we do all the things we know how to keep the body healthy and strong. But the heart, the mind, and the soul, those things will live on, those things are eternal. And I just don't think we spend nearly as much time working on them as we should. So I'm not going to tell you not to go to the gym and do all that stuff. Yes, you should absolutely keep your body healthy. But what I am suggesting is maybe every day spend a little bit more time on who you really are, which is your heart, your mind, and your soul, and see where that gets you in your life.
Beautiful. Thank you, Terry. And your book is called Four Truths and a Lie, and it's found on Amazon. Anywhere else, or is it on
Yeah,
your?
it's pretty much anywhere you can get a book online, you can find
Oh,
Four
okay.
Truths.
Awesome. And I'll put the links in the show notes. Thank you,
Thank you.
Terry.
Thanks, Steph. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. All right, guys. Thanks for listening and watching. Sending love to you all. Bye.